Right now, somewhere behind your eyes, there's a piece of your brain working against you, and it has nothing to do with how hard you try or how many hours you put in. Neuroscience has a name for what happens when a thought gets repeated enough times. The pathway carrying it gets faster, stronger, easier to fall into, whether that thought is true or not. And if you grew up hearing money is tight, people like us don't get rich, be careful. That's not realistic. Your brain never stopped to check if any of it was accurate. It just paved the road. Here's what almost nobody tells you. That road isn't permanent. The same mechanism that wired your brain for poverty can wire it for wealth instead, but only if you know exactly which habits do the rewiring, and which one you're probably practicing backwards right now, without even realizing it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that mechanism is, and the 5 habits that reverse it, one small road at a time. If you've made it this far, it's because you're determined to have a life of success. So I invite you to subscribe to the channel, because every video will help you develop the mindset that attracts wealth, prosperity, and new opportunities every day. Let me show you what I mean before I explain it, because it'll land harder that way. 2 coworkers get offered the exact same opportunity, a side project that could double as the start of something bigger, paid well, low risk, a real shot. The first one says yes within the hour, already picturing how she'll rearrange her evenings to make room for it. The second one says he needs to think about it, and 11 days later he's still thinking, running the same 3 worries in a loop that never quite resolves into a decision either way. Same offer, same city, probably similar bank balances, completely different brain in the driver's seat. You've watched this play out in your own life, on both sides of it. Maybe you were the one who hesitated. I have been, more than once, and for years I assumed it came down to confidence or risk tolerance. It doesn't. What separates those 2 coworkers is something closer to plumbing than personality, a groove in the brain, worn down by years of use, that one of them keeps falling into and the other one simply doesn't have. Here's the mechanism, and everything else in this video builds on it. Your brain runs on connections between neurons, and every time 2 of them fire in sequence, a thought followed by a feeling followed by a behavior, that connection gets a little stronger. Do it once, nothing happens. Do it 1,000 times, and you've built a highway. The brain doesn't ask whether the highway leads somewhere good. It sends traffic down whichever road is already paved, because paved roads are faster than clearing new ground every time. That's not a flaw in the system. It's the system working exactly as designed. Efficiency, not judgment. Now think about what gets paved over 18, 20, 30 years of hearing the same handful of sentences about money. We don't have that kind of money. Don't get your hopes up. People like us have to be realistic. Nobody said those sentences to damage you. Most were trying to protect you from disappointment, the way their own parents protected them. But your brain didn't file those sentences under good intentions. It filed them under instructions, and it built a highway toward caution, toward smallness, toward flinching at exactly the moments that called for confidence instead. This is where Napoleon Hill's work becomes almost eerily precise, because nearly a century before anyone could scan a brain and watch a pathway light up, he was describing this same phenomenon in his own language. In Think and Grow Rich, he devoted an entire section to what he called the 6 basic fears, and he was unambiguous about which one did the most damage across the widest number of lives: the fear of poverty. He described it as a cluster of symptoms that show up quietly, so gradually most people never trace them back to their source. Indifference toward opportunity, chronic indecision, doubt that undermines effort before it starts, low-grade worry that never fully lifts, excessive caution dressed up as prudence, and procrastination that always has a reasonable excuse attached to it. Read that list again, and you'll likely recognize at least 2 of them in your own week, without ever having called them by name before. He wasn't describing a mood. He was describing a system, running quietly behind a person's decisions, shaping outcomes years before that person noticed the pattern. He didn't have the language of neurons and pathways. He was describing the exact same highway, built from a different direction. Here's the part that changes how you should hear the rest of this video. A highway that got built can also get rerouted. That's not a comforting slogan. It's a mechanical fact about how the same neuroplasticity that wired you for hesitation and overcaution operates in both directions, without preference, without memory of which direction it originally paved. The brain doesn't care whether the pathway it's strengthening leads toward poverty or toward wealth. It only cares that the pathway gets used again and again, with enough consistency and enough feeling behind it to matter. That's what the 5 habits ahead of you are actually doing. Not motivating you, not hoping you get lucky. Physically, mechanically, rerouting traffic away from a road you didn't choose to build and toward one you're about to start paving on purpose. And the first habit is the strangest one to start with, because it has almost nothing to do with money at all. It shows up dozens of times a day, in a moment so small you've probably never once noticed it happening, right before a thought about money even finishes forming in your mind. Picture the moment. You're standing in a checkout line, or scrolling past a listing for a trip you'd actually love to take, or a friend mentions an investment they made, and before a single conscious word forms in your mind, something inside you has already delivered the verdict. Can't afford that. Not for people like me. Maybe someday. The verdict arrives before the thought even finishes. That's the part almost nobody catches, because it isn't really a thought at all. It's a reflex. Therapists have a name for this kind of instant, unbidden judgment, an automatic thought, one that fires so fast it feels less like something you decided and more like something you discovered. Already true, already settled. That's what makes it dangerous. A slow thought, you can examine. An instant one gets treated as fact before you've had any chance to ask whether it deserves to be. That reflex is the highway from a moment ago, firing on autopilot the way any well-used pathway does, without waiting for permission. And here's what should unsettle you a little. You've probably never once checked whether the verdict was accurate, because it arrived faster than the part of your brain responsible for checking ever woke up. This is the first habit, and it's smaller than you'd expect from something that reroutes a highway. You catch the thought, not fight it, not argue with it, not immediately flood it with forced positivity. Just catch it in the 2 or 3 seconds after it fires and ask one honest question. Is that true, or is that just the old road talking? I watched a woman who runs a small flower shop describe this habit almost by accident, mid-conversation about something else entirely. For years, every time a supplier offered a better deal on a larger order, her first internal response was the same sentence. I can't swing that right now, delivered with total confidence, before she'd even looked at her actual numbers. One day, mid-reflex, she caught herself saying it and stopped, just to check it. She could, in fact, swing it. The sentence had been running unexamined for years, costing her real money every time she believed it without checking. Here's what surprises most people once they actually try it, because it goes against nearly everything you've been told about managing negative thoughts. You don't need to replace the thought with something positive to weaken it. You barely even need to argue with it. The work happens simply by noticing it as a thought, separate from you, instead of experiencing it as a fact about the world. Psychologists call this diffusion, a small but crucial gap between yourself and whatever your mind just handed you, enough space to decide whether to accept the delivery or send it back. That gap is where the old highway loses traffic every time you use it, and pathways that stop carrying traffic don't stay paved forever. Neuroscientists call that pruning, the brain clearing away connections it no longer relies on. The same efficient system that built the highway, now working in reverse. This is closer to what Napoleon Hill meant by autosuggestion than most people realize, since they usually picture only its second half, a repeated positive statement, said with feeling until it takes root. He was just as insistent on the half that comes first, the part almost nobody quotes. guarding the mind against thoughts you didn't choose to plant there, the way you'd guard a garden against whatever the wind blows in. He described the subconscious as fertile ground that accepts whatever seed reaches it, without asking whether the seed was invited. Catching the automatic thought before it roots is the guarding. Everything else builds on that ground once it's cleared. I'll be honest about what this habit isn't, because false promises are worse than no promises. It won't feel dramatic. Some days you'll catch the thought, question it, and the honest answer will be that the caution was warranted this time. That's fine. That's the checking mechanism doing its job. What changes isn't that every fear turns out false. What changes is that you stop letting a reflex make decisions that deserve an actual thought behind them. Try this for one day before you watch anything else on this channel. Every time a verdict about money arrives in your mind faster than you can explain where it came from, pause for 2 seconds and ask if it's true. You'll be surprised how many times the honest answer is no, and how much of your life has quietly been shaped by a sentence you never once stopped to check. Catching the thought is only half of what rewires the road, though. The other half is what you deliberately put there instead, and that's the part almost everyone who tries this gets backwards. Here's where most people, if they've ever tried anything like this before, go wrong. They catch the old thought, feel a little proud of themselves for catching it, and then plug in a vague, generic replacement. I am rich. Money flows to me easily. Abundance is my nature, said once, in a mirror, without much feeling behind it, and then wondered a week later why absolutely nothing in their life had shifted. I understand the impulse. It's the version of this idea that gets passed around the most, because it's the easiest to package into a single sentence. But your brain doesn't rewire itself around a slogan. It rewires itself around a rehearsal, something specific enough and felt strongly enough that it starts to resemble a memory instead of a wish. And there's a real difference between those two things, one your nervous system can actually tell apart, even if you can't always explain how. Think about what a memory does inside you. When you remember something specific, the exact weight of a door handle in a house you used to live in, the particular smell of a kitchen on a holiday morning years ago, your brain doesn't experience that memory as a suggestion. It experiences it as evidence. Something that happened that's simply true about your life. Athletes have understood a version of this for decades, long before anyone had the imaging equipment to prove it. A skier who mentally rehearses a downhill run in exact, physical detail, the angle of every turn, the specific pull of gravity at each gate, activates much of the same neural territory she'd use actually skiing it. The body doesn't fully distinguish between a vividly rehearsed action and a lived one. Neither does the part of your mind that governs what you believe is possible for you. This is the exact faculty Napoleon Hill placed at the absolute center of everything he taught, and I don't think most people who quote him casually understand how literally he meant it. He didn't describe imagination as daydreaming. He described it as a workshop, a place where a desire gets held in the mind, shaped in specific, concrete detail, and combined with real emotion, until it stops feeling like a hope floating somewhere out ahead of you and starts feeling like something you're already, quietly, in the process of becoming. He was equally specific about the danger of doing this vaguely. A wish without a definite shape produces nothing, because the mind has nothing to grip onto, nothing to build a rehearsal out of. Definiteness was never a minor detail in his work. It was closer to the whole mechanism. I spoke with a man who runs a small contracting business, the kind that spent years bidding on jobs just slightly too big for the size of his crew and losing them anyway. He told me that everything shifted, unglamorously, the year he stopped generally hoping for bigger projects and started rehearsing one specific scene, most nights before falling asleep, sitting across a particular kind of table, in a particular kind of conversation, signing a particular size of contract, feeling the specific mix of nerves and steadiness that moment would actually carry. Not a fantasy of wealth in general. One scene, run in detail, on purpose, night after night, Until the day it finally happened, he told me it felt oddly familiar, like walking into a room he'd somehow already been in. That's the second habit. Not affirming a general outcome. Rehearsing a specific one, in enough sensory and emotional detail that your nervous system starts logging it the way it logs anything else it's experienced repeatedly, as familiar territory, not as foreign ground. Pick one concrete scene tied to what you're actually building. Not "I'll be successful," but the particular moment, the particular room, the particular number on the screen. Run it slowly. Notice how it would feel in your chest, not just what it would look like from the outside. Do that consistently, and you're not hoping anymore. You're rehearsing a memory of a future that hasn't happened yet, and the road toward it gets a little more traveled every single night you do. If any part of that landed somewhere true for you, if you already have a scene like that sitting somewhere in the back of your mind, one you've never said out loud to anyone, type the words wealth mindset in the comments right now. Not as a performance for anyone watching, because naming it, in a moment you chose on purpose, is its own small rehearsal, and the version of you who commits to that scene today is already standing a little closer to the room he's about to walk into. Here's something nobody warns you about when you start a rehearsal like the one I just described. You can run that specific scene every night with real feeling behind it, and still watch the old highway stay stubbornly intact, not because the rehearsal failed, but because of what happens to your mind in the 16 hours surrounding it. Think about an ordinary morning. Eyes open, phone already in hand before your feet touch the floor, and within 90 seconds you've absorbed a headline about the economy tightening, a stranger's home you'll never afford scrolling past in a feed built to make comparison feel effortless, maybe a coworker's first sentence of the day already circling the same complaint about money that circled yesterday and the day before. None of it is dramatic on its own. That's exactly the problem. It's not one loud event doing the damage. It's 40 small ones, absorbed before breakfast, each one a tiny vote for the old road. Your brain doesn't weigh information by how much it matters to your actual life. It weighs by repetition and emotional charge, and very little competes with a steady diet of scarcity for producing both. There's a reason a single dramatic news story about a market crash can leave you feeling shaken for a personal financial decision that has nothing to do with it. Psychologists call it the availability heuristic, the mind's habit of treating whatever comes to it most vividly and most often as the most likely, most relevant truth, whether or not the math actually supports that. Run 40 small scarcity signals through that filter every single morning for years, and you don't need a single traumatic event to build the highway. The commute alone will pave it for you. This is the third habit, and it's less about adding something new and more about noticing what you've been quietly allowing in without ever choosing it on purpose. Guard the input, not by pretending the world's problems don't exist, and not by replacing them with hollow positivity that collapses the second something actually goes wrong. By becoming deliberate about which voices you let narrate your day, the way you'd be deliberate about what you put in your body if a doctor told you your health depended on it. Because in a very real sense, here, it does. I talked with a woman who spent 6 years answering phones at a collections call center, listening to strangers' financial panic for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. She told me she watched it change people around her. Not because the calls were about their own money, but because the emotional residue of that many scarcity conversations doesn't stay contained to work hours. It follows you home. It sits at your dinner table. It colors how you read your own bank statement, even when nothing about your own numbers actually changed. What saved her, in her words, wasn't quitting the job. It was building a hard boundary around the transition. 15 minutes in her car before driving home, in silence, deliberately not carrying the last call through her own front door. Small, unglamorous. She told me it was the only reason she didn't end up thinking about her own finances the way her angriest callers thought about theirs. Napoleon Hill wrote about this under a heading most people skim past on their way to the more exciting chapters: the influence of environment on the subconscious mind. He was specific about it in a way that still holds up. The subconscious doesn't just absorb what you deliberately feed it through affirmation and rehearsal. It absorbs the tone of whatever surrounds you most consistently, whether or not you're paying conscious attention, whether or not you even agree with what you're absorbing. He warned particularly about the danger of prolonged exposure to people and environments soaked in fear and failure, not because those people are bad, but because their emotional weather becomes yours through nothing more than proximity and repetition. None of this means cutting off people you love who happen to be going through something hard, or pretending the news doesn't exist. It means noticing the difference between information you actually need and emotional residue you've been absorbing on autopilot, and building small, specific boundaries around the second one. 15 minutes before you touch your phone in the morning. A car ride in silence instead of the radio's worst story of the day. One conversation redirected, gently, when it circles into the same complaint for the third time this week. The fourth habit is where all three of these finally start showing up somewhere you can actually measure. Not in your thoughts anymore, but in what your hands are doing on an ordinary Tuesday, when nobody's watching and nothing about the moment feels significant at all. Here's something I have to be straight with you about, because I think it's the exact spot where most people who try any of this quietly give up. Catching the thought, rehearsing the scene, guarding what you let into your mind. None of it finishes the job on its own. Thought alone can circle a pathway for months without ever wearing it down. The same way standing at the edge of a field and imagining a trail doesn't actually put a trail there. Something has to walk it. That something is behavior, and it's the part almost nobody wants to hear, because it's the part that costs you something today, in a currency more expensive than good intentions. Here's why the brain needs it. Your nervous system doesn't fully trust a thought on its own. Thoughts are cheap, and some part of you, quietly, knows it. What it does trust, at a much deeper level, is what you actually do, especially when you do it consistently and nobody's forcing you to. Psychologists studying identity and self-perception have found this again and again. We don't only act according to who we believe we are, we come to believe we are whoever we've been consistently acting like, sometimes even more than the other way around. Behavior isn't just an output of the new wiring. It's an input. It's the evidence the rest of the system has been waiting for. So here's the fourth habit, and it's smaller than you'd expect, because it has to be small enough to actually keep. It's not the money itself. It's the specific, repeated action of treating whatever money you do have the way someone financially secure treats theirs, starting immediately, at whatever scale you're currently working with. I talked to a woman who waited tables for 11 years before opening a small catering business that now runs 2 full kitchens. She told me the habit that mattered most wasn't anything she did after the business took off. It was something she started doing while she was still living paycheck to paycheck, setting aside $5 from every single shift, before anything else touched that money, into an account she wasn't allowed to look at except once a month. $5 changes nothing mathematically. She knew that. That was never the point. The point was that every single shift, she practiced being someone who pays herself first, long before there was enough money for the habit to matter financially at all. And here, finally, is the part one promised you at the start of this video. The habit almost everyone gets backwards, usually without ever realizing it. Most people assume the order runs like this. First you get enough money, then you start managing it like someone responsible. Save once there's something worth saving. Budget once there's enough to budget. Invest once you've got extra. It sounds logical. It's also exactly backwards, and it's the single biggest reason a sudden windfall, a raise, an inheritance, a bonus, so often disappears within a year or two without leaving much behind. The money arrived before the wiring did. There was no practiced pathway ready to receive it, hold it, direct it anywhere useful, so it simply followed whatever road was already paved, usually straight back toward the old habits that were there the whole time, just waiting for enough fuel to run on. The $500 a month someone saves while broke and the $5,000 a month they'll save once they're not are being handled, neurologically, by the exact same pathway. Build it small now, on purpose, with money you can barely spare, and by the time there's real money moving through your life, the road's already there, already worn smooth, already capable of carrying that kind of weight without buckling. Wait for the money first, and you're asking a road that's never been built to suddenly handle traffic it's never once carried. That's the mechanism underneath everything I've shown you so far, and it's simpler than 5 separate habits might have made it feel. Catching the thought clears the old road. Rehearsing the scene and guarding your input build the emotional charge that makes a new road worth paving. And the 4th habit, acting now, at whatever scale you actually have, the way you intend to act later, is the traffic itself, the only thing that turns an intention into a highway your brain will actually trust with real weight when it finally arrives. There's a 5th habit left, and it's the one that decides whether any of this holds up under real pressure. The moment money actually starts to move through your hands, and the oldest fear you carry about it quietly resurfaces to test everything you've just built. Here's the moment I mean, and you've almost certainly lived through some version of it. Money actually arrives, a paycheck lands, a client pays an invoice, a bonus shows up you weren't fully counting on, and instead of feeling steady, something in your chest tightens. Maybe you rush to spend it, quickly, on something that relieves the discomfort of having it sit there unspent. Maybe you do the opposite and clutch it, terrified to move a single dollar, checking the balance 4 times in an hour like it might quietly disappear if you stop watching it. Different behaviors. Same nervous system, running the same old program underneath. I want you to sit with that for a second, because it's one of the more uncomfortable truths in this whole video. The person who spends a windfall recklessly and the person who hoards it in fear look like opposites. They're not. Both are stress responses to the same underlying threat signal. Money registering, deep in a part of the brain that doesn't do nuance, as danger rather than resource. One person discharges that danger by getting rid of the money as fast as possible. The other discharges it by locking the money away where it can't be touched, can't be risked, can't be lost. Neither one is actually relating to the money. Both are just trying to make the alarm stop ringing. Researchers who study scarcity and decision-making have a term for what happens to attention under this kind of pressure. Tunneling, the mind narrowing so tightly around the immediate threat that it loses the bandwidth to think clearly about anything else, including the money itself. It's the same mechanism that makes a hungry person struggle to plan next week's meals, or an overdrawn account swallow someone's ability to think past the next 72 hours. The tunnel isn't a character flaw. It's what a threatened nervous system does by design, and money, for a lot of people, has been coded as a threat since long before they earned their first paycheck. This is the 5th habit, and it's the quietest of the 5, though I'd argue it's the one that determines whether the other 4 actually hold up once real money starts moving through your life instead of just moving through your imagination. You build a specific, small ritual of acknowledgement around money as it comes and goes. Not gratitude as a performance, not a forced smile at a bill you resent paying, but a genuine, brief pause that interrupts the threat response before it has the chance to hijack the moment. 10 seconds. That's usually enough. Long enough to notice what actually happened. Value was exchanged, work was recognized, a need got met, before the old alarm gets the chance to answer for you. I talked to a man who spent most of his 20s either avoiding his bank app entirely for weeks at a stretch or checking it so compulsively it interrupted his sleep. The 2 faces of the same fear, taking turns. What changed, he told me, wasn't a system or a spreadsheet. It was a habit almost embarrassingly small. Every time money came in, before doing anything else with it, he made himself say, out loud if he could, what it represented. This is 4 hours of work I'm proud of. This is a client who trusted me with something real. 10 seconds, maybe less. He said it felt ridiculous the first dozen times. Somewhere around the 50th, he noticed he'd stopped checking the app compulsively because some part of him had finally stopped treating incoming money as a threat that needed constant surveillance. This connects to something Napoleon Hill spent much of his later career developing alongside W. Clement Stone. The idea that a positive mental attitude isn't a personality trait some people are lucky enough to be handed. It's a trained, deliberate orientation toward whatever circumstance is actually in front of you, chosen on purpose, especially in the exact moments your instincts are pulling you toward fear instead. He didn't mean pretending difficulty away. He meant refusing to let a threatened nervous system cast the only vote on how you relate to your own resources. 5 habits. All 5 real. All 5 practiced, in some form, by people who started with nothing more than what you're holding in your hands right now: attention, a nervous system, and the choice of which pathway to keep feeding. But I'd be doing you a disservice if I ended there and let you believe any of this is easy, or that building it makes the old fear simply vanish one day and never return. I know what part of you might be thinking right now, and I'd rather say it out loud myself than let it sit there unanswered. Isn't this just another version of positive thinking? The kind that quietly ignores rent going up faster than wages, medical bills that arrive without warning, a job market that doesn't care how well you've rehearsed a specific scene in your head before falling asleep. If that's what I just described to you, you'd be right to distrust it, and I'd distrust it too. That's not what any of this is. Notice that not one of the 5 habits asked you to pretend a real problem isn't real. Catching an automatic thought doesn't erase a genuine financial constraint. It just stops a reflex from making decisions that deserve an actual thought behind them, which is a different thing entirely. Guarding your input doesn't mean ignoring the news. It means noticing the difference between information that helps you act and emotional residue that only helps you feel worse while changing nothing. None of these habits tell you the world is fair. They tell you that inside whatever your circumstances actually are, there's still a nervous system running the show, and it's worth knowing which direction it's currently pointed. I also won't pretend the work is light. There will be stretches, sometimes long ones, where you catch every automatic thought, rehearse the scene faithfully, guard your attention, act in small ways toward the person you're building, treat money with respect instead of fear, and absolutely nothing visible changes. The account balance looks the same. The opportunity you were half expecting doesn't arrive on schedule or arrives for someone else instead. That gap between effort and evidence is real, and it will test you, probably more than once, usually at the exact moment you're most tired and least able to absorb another disappointment gracefully. Maybe it's watching a coworker who complains constantly, saves nothing, and somehow still lands the promotion because he golfs with the right person on weekends. Maybe it's a sibling who inherited a financial cushion you never had, posting a life online that looks effortless from where you're standing, never once mentioning the parents who covered the down payment. I won't tell you that isn't unfair, because sometimes it plainly is. Circumstances aren't distributed evenly, and pretending otherwise would insult what you're actually living through. What almost nobody tells you is that the test was never really about them. It's about whether the pathway you're building can survive contact with a result you didn't ask for and don't deserve, because it will get tested that way, sooner or later, and the habit that matters is the one you keep on the day it doesn't seem to be working. Here's something else worth being honest about, because I think a lot of people quietly expect this and feel like failures when it doesn't happen. None of these 5 habits are supposed to make the doubt disappear. I used to believe that once you understood a principle deeply enough, the old fear would simply stop showing up, that certainty was the finish line, and if you still felt afraid, you were doing it wrong. That's backwards. The doubt doesn't leave. What changes is that you stop needing it to leave before you're willing to act anyway. The fear and the decision learn to sit in the same room together. And eventually you notice the fear has gotten quieter, not because you defeated it, but because you stopped handing it the steering wheel every single time it spoke up. I want to tell you about the night I learned that difference myself. because I don't think I've ever fully said this out loud on this channel before, and I think you deserve the honest version rather than the tidy one. When I was 11, I watched my mother turn down a promotion over the phone in our kitchen in about 40 seconds, without once asking what it paid. I remember the exact tone of her voice, not sad, not conflicted, just certain, the way you sound when you're declining something you've already decided isn't meant for people like you. She hung up, made dinner, and never mentioned it again. I didn't understand until much later that I hadn't just witnessed a decision. I'd watched a pathway get demonstrated to me, live, by someone I loved and trusted completely, and some part of my 11-year-old brain filed it away as instruction rather than as one woman's fear on one particular afternoon. I told you earlier in this video that I started this channel while running my own quiet experiment, and I meant that. What I didn't tell you was the specific night the old wiring almost won, because I still find it a little embarrassing to say out loud, even now. About a year in, the channel had grown just enough to make a real decision necessary. Reinvest almost everything it had earned so far into better equipment and the kind of research time this kind of work actually demands, or take the money, quietly, and treat it as a nice bonus on top of everything else I already had going. The second option was safe, reasonable. Nobody would have questioned it. And I remember sitting with my laptop open to the checkout page, cursor hovering, and hearing my mother's exact tone in my own head, 40 years later, in my own voice this time. That's not for people like us. Don't get your hopes up. Be realistic. I want to be honest about what happened next, because it wasn't some cinematic moment of clarity. I closed the laptop. I didn't buy anything that night. I told myself I'd think about it. The same soft postponement I'd watched circle other people's decisions 100 times by that point in my research, without ever once recognizing it in myself until that exact evening. What actually changed my mind 2 days later was an inspiration. It was catching the thought, the way I've described to you throughout this entire video, and asking the only question that ever actually matters. Is that true, or is that just the old road talking? And when I sat with it honestly, the answer wasn't complicated. My mother's fear had made sense for her circumstances in that decade, with the information and the options she had in front of her at the time. It had nothing whatsoever to do with mine. I wasn't protecting myself by staying small. I was just repeating a pathway that had never actually been mine to begin with, inherited, unexamined, running on autopilot for 30 years because nobody had ever stopped to check whether it still applied. I bought the equipment 2 days later. I won't pretend it transformed everything overnight, because it didn't, and I'd be lying to you if I dressed this up as a bigger turning point than it actually was in the moment. What it did do was smaller and, I think now, more important. It was one piece of traffic on a new road, laid down on top of 30 years of the old one, which is exactly how this works. Not in a single dramatic reversal, but one specific decision at a time, made consciously, in the exact moment the old programming expected you to fold. I think about my mother often, and I want to be careful here, because this isn't a story about blaming her for anything. She did the best she could with what she'd been given, the same as her own mother did before her, and the same as most of us are doing right now with whatever we were handed. That's the part that actually matters most. None of us chose the road that got built, but every one of us, on some ordinary evening with a laptop open or a decision waiting, gets to choose whether we keep walking it. That kitchen phone call happened almost 30 years ago, and it still runs, faintly, somewhere underneath decisions I make today. I don't think it ever fully disappears. I think you just get better at hearing it, catching it, and asking it the one honest question it's never once been asked before. So let's make this practical, because I don't want you leaving this video with 5 interesting ideas and nowhere to actually put them. Here's where you start, tonight, before the feeling that brought you this far has a chance to fade the way it usually does by tomorrow morning. Start with the first habit, because it requires nothing except attention you already have. For the next 24 hours, Notice every single time a verdict about money arrives in your mind before you've consciously thought anything at all. Can't afford it. Not for me. Maybe someday. Don't argue with it. Just catch it and ask the one question that matters. Is that true? Or is that the old road talking? You'll be tempted to skip this because it feels too small to count as real work. It's not small. It's the only habit on this list that clears space for the other 4 to actually take hold. Once you've caught a few of those thoughts, pick one specific scene for the second habit. Not a vague sense of future success. One concrete moment tied to something you're actually building. Where are you standing? What does the room look like? What number are you looking at? And what does it feel like in your chest to be looking at it? Run that scene tonight, slowly, before you fall asleep, the same way you'd replay a memory rather than construct a fantasy. Do it again tomorrow night. The specificity is what makes it work. A vague wish gives your brain nothing to rehearse. For the third habit, look honestly at your first 90 seconds after waking up tomorrow. What's the first thing that reaches you? A headline, a feed built to manufacture comparison, a complaint from someone in the house before you've even had coffee. You don't need to overhaul your entire information diet overnight. Change one thing. Leave the phone in another room for those first 90 seconds. Notice what that single boundary does to the rest of your morning, and build from there once you've felt the difference for yourself. The fourth habit asks more of you, because it's the one that costs something today instead of just costing your attention. Find one small, specific financial action that treats you the way you intend to be treated later, and do it this week, regardless of the amount. Move $5 somewhere it can't be casually spent. Negotiate one price instead of accepting the first number you're given. Track 1 week of spending honestly, without any shame attached to what you find there. The amount was never the point. The consistency is what's actually building the road. And for the fifth, the next time any money moves through your hands, a bill paid, a paycheck received, even a small purchase, take 10 seconds before reacting on instinct. Notice what actually happened underneath the transaction. Value exchanged. Effort recognized. A need genuinely met. Let that be the first response, before fear or urgency gets the chance to answer for you instead. If all 5 at once feels like too much, that's fine. It usually is, for most people, at the start. Pick one. Give it a week before adding the next. The order I've laid them out in isn't arbitrary. Each one clears a little more ground for the next to actually take root. But even one habit, practiced honestly for 7 days, will teach you more about how this actually works than 5 habits attempted half-heartedly for a single afternoon and then abandoned the moment life gets busy again, the way most things quietly get abandoned. None of these 5 things, done once, will change your life by next week. I want to be honest about that, the same way I've tried to be honest with you throughout this entire video. But a road doesn't get built in one afternoon either. It gets built the way every road you've ever walked has been built, one pass at a time, mostly unremarkable, until one day you notice you're not thinking about the walk anymore, because your feet already know the way. There's one more story I want to leave you with before we close tonight, because I think it says something about all 5 habits together that I haven't been able to say any other way. Her name was Ruth, and she spent 19 years as a hospice nurse before she ever seriously considered working for herself. She told me she grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 siblings, in a family where the phrase "we can't afford" that got said so often it stopped registering as information and started functioning more like weather. Just a condition you lived inside, not something anyone questioned or expected to change. The idea of starting her own in-home care agency sat in the back of her mind for almost a decade before she did anything about it. Not because she lacked the skill. She was, by every account I could find, extraordinary at the actual work. She lacked, in her words, permission she'd never once been formally denied, but had somehow absorbed as fact anyway. She started small, almost accidentally, taking on a few private clients on weekends while still working her full-time hospital shifts, and somewhere in that unglamorous overlap, She started practicing the habits we've talked about tonight, though she never called them that. She caught herself, mid-sentence, telling a patient's daughter she probably couldn't take on new clients before she'd even checked her actual schedule. She started running one very specific scene at night. Not vague success, but the particular weight of a set of keys to a small office, the particular smell of the waiting room she pictured building. She stopped listening to a coworker who complained every single shift about how nursing never paid what it should. And every time a private client paid her directly, she made herself pause and actually register it, instead of shoving the check into a drawer to deal with later, the way she used to. 2 years into that quiet practice, a small local agency came up for sale. The actual building, the client list, everything, sold by an owner retiring after 30 years. The number was real money for her. Not impossible, but close enough to it that saying yes meant a 5-figure check with her name on it, sitting on a desk across from a loan officer who kept glancing at her file like he was doing arithmetic she couldn't see. She told me that in the exact second before she picked up the pen, the old weather rolled back in, all at once, stronger than it had been in years. We can't afford that. Not people like us. She said her hand actually stopped moving. Not for effect, genuinely stopped, mid-air, over a signature line that represented everything she'd quietly rehearsed for 2 years, landing in one single, terrifying moment. And she told me the thing that got her hand moving again wasn't confidence. It was the question, is that true, or is that the old road talking? She sat with it, right there at the desk, loan officer waiting, and the honest answer was that it wasn't true anymore. It had been true for her parents, in their decade, with their options. It had nothing to do with the woman sitting in that chair, who had built, quietly, for 2 years, exactly the kind of evidence that made this decision hers to make. She signed. The agency is still hers, 7 years later, and it now employs 11 nurses doing the kind of work she spent 19 years doing for someone else's business instead of her own. Here's the detail she told me last, almost as an afterthought, and it's the one I haven't been able to stop thinking about since. A few years after she bought the agency, her mother finally told her, for the first time, why money had been such a constant emergency throughout Ruth's whole childhood. It wasn't a personality trait, or bad luck spread evenly across a whole life. It was one specific year, her father's factory closing during a recession Ruth had been too young to remember, a scramble that never fully resolved itself even after he found new work, a fear that took root in one particular season and then quietly ran the household for the next 2 decades, long after the actual danger had passed. One year, one frightened, exhausted decision to hold on to that fear a little too tightly, repeated so many times afterward that nobody in the family ever thought to ask whether it still applied. Ruth told me she cried when she heard that, not from anger, but from something closer to relief. It had never been a truth about her family. It had been a single afternoon that never got revisited, carried forward by habit long after the reason for it had disappeared. And once she saw it that clearly, she said, it became almost impossible to keep mistaking her own inherited fear for fact ever again. There's a road running somewhere behind your eyes right now, the one we started with at the very beginning of this video, paved by every sentence about money you absorbed before you were old enough to question any of it, worn smooth by decades of traffic you never consciously chose to send down it. I told you at the start that it wasn't permanent. I meant that, and I hope by now you believe it a little more than you did 40 minutes ago. You have the 5 habits now. Catching the thought before it hardens into fact. Rehearsing a specific scene instead of a vague hope. Guarding what you let narrate your days. Acting now, in whatever small way you can afford, as the person you intend to become later. Meeting money with acknowledgement instead of fear, whichever direction it happens to be moving. None of them looked dramatic on their own. That was never an accident. The road was never built in one afternoon, and it was never going to get rerouted in one either. What Ruth's story left me with, more than any single detail about her business, was what her mother finally told her, that an entire family's relationship with money had been shaped by one frightened year, decades earlier, that nobody ever went back to question. I think about how many of us are still driving on a road built the exact same way. Not because anyone meant to trap us there, because a moment of real fear once got treated as permanent instruction, and nobody in the years since had the information or the language or the 2 seconds of pause required to ask whether it still applied. You have that language now. You have the 2 seconds. What you do with them tonight and tomorrow and on the ordinary Tuesday 3 weeks from now, when nobody's watching and nothing about the moment feels significant, that's the part one can't do for you and wouldn't want to, because a road only gets rerouted by whoever actually walks it. I don't know your version of the kitchen phone call, or the desk with the loan officer waiting, or the 11 days a decision sat unmade while you called it thinking it over. I only know that almost everyone carrying real weight towards something better eventually meets a version of that moment. Old wiring, real fear, a pin hovering somewhere just above the line. Somewhere tonight, someone is standing at that exact line for the first time, and somewhere else, someone else is standing at it for maybe the 100th, having crossed it 99 times before and still feeling the same flicker of the old fear every single time. Both of them are doing the same work. Neither of them is behind. The brain that got wired for poverty was never built with malice, and it was never built by you. But the one it becomes from here, that part has your fingerprints on it, one small, unremarkable decision at a time, starting with whichever one of these 5 habits you choose to practice tonight, long before there's any proof yet that it's working. Napoleon Hill spent the last years of his life insisting that the wealth people chase and the wealth that actually changes them were rarely the same thing, that a person could fill an account and still carry every symptom of poverty underneath, or build something modest while quietly becoming someone unrecognizable, in the best sense, from who they used to be. I didn't understand that distinction the first time I read it. I understand it a little better now, watching Ruth talk about the 11 nurses she employs with more pride in her voice than she ever used when describing the number on her first loan approval. If this reached you tonight, follow the channel before you go, because the work we've talked about here isn't a single video's worth of change. It's a practice, and you'll want this kind of thing waiting for you on the nights the old road feels loudest. And if you know 5 people quietly standing at their own version of that line right now, send this to them. You might be the reason one of them picks up the pen